This part of the industry training series on the director of photography will cover on-set techniques for lighting, camera placement, and just general on-set practices. Before we get there though, I want to talk a little bit about some tools that are going to make your job on set a lot easier. The first thing you're going to want is some form of multi-tool. It doesn't have to be a Leatherman, but as long as it has like pliers, some basic screwdrivers, and things like that will really be helpful on set when you're working with different sort of like rigs and setups and things like that. You're going to want some sort of voltage tester. Mine doubles as a flashlight, which is also very important if you're working on your camera in the dark, you can be able to see. But this is just a great safety thing to have on you when you're dealing with lights that draw a lot of power. You want to make sure you're being as safe as possible and know what wires are live, what aren't, and that sort of thing. Markers are also great. Expo markers, Sharpies, Allen keys are also things you're going to want to have on your body. This is just a little like air squeeze thing that is really good if you're changing a lot of lenses and you get some dust on your sensor. You can just blow all that dust right out. I think the most important thing to have on you are a pair of work gloves. A lot of the lights that you're going to be working with produce a lot of heat, and you want to make sure that you're just protecting your hands and making sure you're as safe as possible. And you don't have to spend a ton of money on these things. Like, you don't need a crazy expensive Leatherman. You can find much cheaper multi-tools, things like that. But you can put together a whole pouch like this for like around $40, $50. And it's just things that are really great to have on you and things that are going to make your job a whole lot easier. Let's talk lighting a little bit. So as you've probably learned in foundations class, three-point lighting is a great place to start. However, it's important to remember that it can be limiting in a lot of situations. It's important to remember that three-point lighting is very subject-driven, but the environment that your subject is in is just as important to consider as well. So in most situations, you're going to want to try and merge your lighting into your environment. So instead of lighting your character as if they're just sort of in front of your environment, in most situations, you're going to want to tie them into the environment, and you do this by motivating your lighting. So that can be by matching a kick light through a window, or by through some sort of lamp, just making sure that your lighting decisions make sense in your space and lighting your space as if it's a character too. Let's talk about light quality a little bit. On like sort of the primary colors of lighting is the idea of hard light versus soft light. Now, hard light and soft light all has to do with the size of your light source. So a small undiffused source will produce harsh shadows with a lot of contrast and bright highlights, whereas a large diffused source will produce softer light, which will generally produce much more pleasing contrast. If you're lighting a subject, you'll get a lot smoother roll-off between like the brighter parts and the darker parts of their face, and just overall nicer like gradations over the skin. Now, key light placement is just as important as the actual key light that you choose to use. In most situations, you're going to want to avoid front lighting, which is just placing your light directly in front of your subject. It's not very flattering, and it doesn't create that nice sort of gradation between like bright to dark on skin tones that looks very like cinematic feeling. You can start by just lifting your light up a bit to create the top to bottom bright to dark, or you can start moving your light over to either side of your subject. A really famous sort of lighting technique here would be Rembrandt lighting, which is where you get a nice shadow from the bright to dark with a light triangle on the dark side of their face. It's named after the painter who would sort of paint people in that same sort of light. Since all lights produce light in different ways, you have like RE tungsten lights, you have LEDs, you have like Fresnels. The color of these lights are slightly different, even if they are just a white color. It is important to match your camera's white balance to the color of the light that you are using. And this is measured in Kelvin. So you have at the on tungsten end, which is 3200 Kelvin, all the way up to daylight, which would be 5600 Kelvin. Let's talk about camera placement. Like lighting, it's extremely subjective, and there's way too much to cover in a short session. But for fundamental scene coverage, like a two-person conversation like we'll be filming here, a great starting point is standard three-point coverage. Now this consists of a wide shot and two mediums, and like three-point lighting, three-point coverage can become limiting or a little bit repetitive if it's the only thing you're falling back on. It's meant to be just a starting point for you to build the rest of your coverage off of. A great way to break from stock three-point coverage is by introducing movement at a key moment. So this can be achieved by maybe starting a slow dolly in on a character during a realization, or as a character reacts to something they've just been told, or by cutting to a tighter shot altogether. You could cut to an insert, just trying to find ways to vary up these shots in order to just create more visual interest that is, of course, story-driven. You can also you can work with your director to block these conversations with movement. So maybe they're walking through a park, and just by how you follow these two characters having a conversation, you can tell a lot without really saying any words. Like, is the camera moving behind trees? Is the camera far away? It could maybe come with the assumption that they're being watched or listened to. Or if you just want to follow them right next to them, that works as well. Just finding ways to vary up that three-point coverage beyond just the standard three-point coverage is a great way to start experimenting with your different visual language.
Are you kidding me?
What?
You're typing like a mad woman.
I'm just doing my homework.
Okay, try not to aggravate me.
Should I leave?
No, just don't aggravate me.